And we're live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from in the world. Welcome to another High Vibe Conversation. I'm your host, Shel Shapiro, and with us today is special guest Michael McKnight. We're excited to have Michael here with the High Vibe Women to talk about the traumatized child. So, Michael, we want to give you a warm welcome, and if you can unmute yourself and let everybody know who you are and what kind of work you do.
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me. I am excited to talk with everybody and get to meet new folks. So it's always fun. I'll start with I'm married and have two children now, ages 25 and 31. So that's been fun and great to see how they unfold. I also was a teacher. I taught special education for 14 years, usually with children removed from regular schools and classified as conduct disordered or emotionally disturbed adolescents. I did that for 14 years, and then I became an administrator at a special services school district here in southern New Jersey, where I landed, and worked with troubled kids ages 5 to 18 for a little bit over a decade. I like to tell folks that's when the rest of my hair fell out. But they certainly have driven my learning for a long, long time now. After spending almost 25 years working hands-on with kids, I joined the New Jersey Department of Education and worked in both Cape May and Atlantic County, New Jersey, with the schools, kind of as a middleman between the Department of Ed and the schools. But in that time, I've gotten to visit and walk through just literally hundreds of schools, and it's always fun to do that. I've never been in a school that I haven't seen something positive to steal and share with other schools. And currently have been and continue to train schools in how to become trauma responsive and to create resilient environments for kids. So that's kind of what I spend my time mostly doing now. I'm also an adjunct at Stockton University down here, getting to work with future teachers. So a bit downstream as well as upstream as we try to support kids that are going to our schools. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, so that's so exciting. Like a lot of the good work that is coming out of you and that you're bringing to all these schools and the Department of Education, to the children directly, to the schools, to the teachers, and to future teachers of America that need to learn how to be more trauma informed and trauma responsive. So I guess a good place to start is, what kind of things are you seeing when you walk into these schools? What kinds of experiences are you having with the traumatized child, and like what is their upbringing like? I know we quickly talked about this before the live, while we were waiting for the ladies to join us, about like not really having the support of the community and not really building the schools and the community up together. So what kind of things are you experiencing with them?
Well, a couple of things. First, I got to tell you, although I do share this work an awful lot, I don't share it through my work with the Department of Ed. Their priorities are very different. I did work for them, didn't tell them often what I was doing, but again, our systems are still stuck on, and have been really since probably the year 2000 and a little bit before that, with testing kids, and ranking schools and doing that sort of work, which completely kind of takes off the table some of the issues that are currently happening within schools. So I got to straighten that one up. But So, what we're seeing is, I mean, for instance, in New Jersey has the sixth most segregated public school system in the United States for Black children, and the seventh most segregated school system for Hispanic students in the nation. Often those schools are filled with children with high levels of poverty, high levels of community disruption. So when I'm working with educators, one of my missions is really to take them into their world and have them begin to recognize that the problems kids are causing are not in school, are not really the cause of their problem. That our kids, that those kids that give teachers the most trouble are actually kids that come out of very toxic environments with adversity. And so sharing with teachers about adverse childhood experiences and what they are. Sharing the work of like Dr. Wendy Ellis and her work on adverse community environments and what they are. And then recognizing what that does to the brains and bodies of kids, and what that looks like. And in schools, it really looks like just poor behavior. These kids are dysregulated. They have trouble sitting still. Often we over medicate them. So the big transition is really to first identify what's underneath the behaviors that we're dealing with every day in our schools. And that's where the work begins to start as we begin to then make some shifts.
So it sounds a lot like the behaviors that you're seeing in schools are symptomatic of other things that are going on. So do you then go in and approach each symptom individually, or like how do you go in and create change?
Um, well, no, we don't really need to address each symptom independently. That would take forever. What we do really need to do is learn a little. I think first about the brains and bodies of kids. So we talk a little bit about how brains develop. They develop from the bottom to the top, and from the inside out. And the top part of the brain, the cortex, where school is done, is the last part of the brain to develop. It's not fully mature until ages 25 to 30 years old. So nobody in our schools is working with a fully mature brain in our schools. So, but what happens with kids that come out of environments of toxic stress and trauma is they are unable to access the learning part of their brain. They are really stuck in a persistent state of alarm in the emotional centers of their brain, where the amygdala lives. And if you make okay signs and put okay signs on the side of your head, if I were to drill a hole here on both sides, I would hit the amygdala. It's our fight, flight, freeze response system. In all of us, we've all been triggered at one time or another and become triggered in that alarm state. Normally, that alarm state dissipates and we go back to a regulated state. Kids that are carrying around levels of toxic stress and trauma don't rebound. They're in that persistent state of alarm. And that's what it always feels like. Trauma is embodied. So these kids often are unable to access the learning part of their brain in schools. And I work with teachers on one, first recognizing that, and then two, different ways we can begin to work with children to be able to regulate them instead of disciplining them and getting them ready to learn. If that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Linda, is this something that you experienced part of when at the psychiatric day treatment center?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
My first 3 years of teaching troubled adolescents were literally a nightmare. I had graduated with a degree in special education, and was working in a self-contained class with adolescents, kicked out of regular schools, and I can remember, in my first year, by Christmas, I was looking in the mirror going, "Oh my God, what did I choose to do with my life? I'm terrible at this." Um, because we really don't, even then didn't train teachers. We continue not to train teachers really well in this. And what we've learned since I started about the brain and body sciences and what's going on within these kids really has changed a lot of what we now know about our most troubled kids. At that time, what changed the direction of my career was taking a job in a private placement called Vision Quest, where I was a teacher in the Vision Quest program, but I also got to spend time covering their group homes. Kids lived there. It was a residential placement, spending time covering group homes, taking kids on family visits, sitting in on counseling sessions, and listening to the stories and the pain in their lives. And finally recognizing, whoa, wait a second. This behavior I'm seeing, it isn't about me. It is about the pain that they've had in their lives. And all these kids are carrying around deep pain. We now know that pain lights up very similar regions as physical pain in the brain area and regions. So, we even now I talk about kids and shifting away from behaviors into calling this what it is. It's pain-based behavior we're dealing with. This is the behaviors of children in pain. It looks a lot like disrespect. It looks a lot like disobedience. It looks a lot like being completely shut down. And we can kind of talk about that. But that was my first transition into, oh, geez, let's look at the lives of the kids that are sitting in front of us.
Yeah, and when I was working at a psychiatric day treatment center, I originally did a little bit of teaching in the system, did an awful lot of private clinical work, worked with moms, mostly moms, and we were even looking at biochemistry. We were looking at foods, and I had a whole child institute, and a gal that was opening the younger wing of psychiatric day treatment center for kindergarten through 5th grade came to me and got some information, and then they they had 2 really pretty docile kids come in 1 month after another, and when they first started, it was like seriously boring there, and then all of a sudden they got 7 violent kids in a matter of 2 weeks time. So she reached out, and I went up to see what was happening and how I could support her staff. So then after my observation, I sat down with the staff and I said, well, first of all, we're going to stop talking left brain to all these right brain kids. So even if you're a left brainer and your brain's not working real well, you're going to be more of a right brainer because you're just going to be so caught up in emotion. The other thing that happened that I noticed is I said, so, the kind of the joke of moms is if you want to know where your kids are, get on the phone. And if you want to be left alone, do the dishes, unless they're little kids, and then it doesn't work. The dishes, they want to splash with you. So I just said, if you're going, because our behavior managers would enter the room a lot. And it's like, if you're going to come into a classroom and, just no eye contact, beeline to the teacher's desk and leave a note. If you absolutely need to get a note to the teacher, again, no eye contact, not with the kids, not with the teacher, just hand the note and leave. And just those 2 simple little things made so much difference in whether the kids were going to get set off or not. We had one boy that had a lot of attachment disorder issues, and he absolutely could not walk down the hall in front of staff. If he was in front of staff, he would turn around. He would walk backwards facing the staff. And that just became like seriously obvious, what attachment disorder is all about, and the lack of trust going on as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the thing I brought was academically was slowing everything down, playing. We didn't do academics, we played. Finally, I got asked, could you please do a little academics? Well, by that time, the kids weren't punching each other out. I literally could get them all sitting down at my little kidney-shaped table. And we did schoolwork for 5 minutes, and then we built it to 10 minutes. I had one kid who would just like spring out of his chair early on in the program, and we had triangular desks. I was able to have him in the corner with the triangular desk and then me right there. And the springing behavior, I got that pretty good, and then a new gal came. She was getting her PhD, and she was, it took 2 adults, one on either side, and she was helping me. And then she goes, are you a psychologist? And I said, no, but I can shrink a shrink. So yeah, I know what you're talking about, Michael. I had over 30 years special ed, and getting that brain slowed down and connected is huge. We did a lot of even alternative things like auditory integration, processing with the audio tapes. We were able to have the kids assessed and get their own audio tapes, which helped quite a bit. One boy who, these kids weren't learning, so it was like 5 different school districts that were feeding into our program. And the people who actually owned our program were like, yeah, he'll never get out of here. And if he does, he'll be back. And then his mom was doing alternative therapies outside as well. And one day he was so mad at me. He's like, you're the worst teacher in the world. And when he got out and then came back to give me a little gift, he said, you're not the meanest teacher in the world. You're the best teacher in the universe. That's like, I'll take it. Because we don't always get the thank yous. But it is really fun to watch the kids make progress. I think the worst thing that was happening is bringing a kid with autism into an EBD setting. Whoa, my friend had the opposite. She had an autistic class, and they were bringing a kid with EBD in, and he'd just flip everybody's desk. Well, one of the kids followed suit, the kid with autism, and so the kid with EBD flipped everybody's desk but his own, and the kid with autism flipped everybody's desk and his own. So they were like, there's some really simple tests if you want to look at labels.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed as I walked through a million schools in New Jersey were the majority of these kids are not classified, right? So, I mean, although I taught with classified kids and worked with them, there are literally thousands and thousands of these kids sitting in regular classrooms, and certainly even in our regular classrooms, given some schools all kinds of issues, and again we kind of to backing up and looking even at a big picture kind of level. Often we're stuck in our own areas and see the world through that area. And yet, in the United States, give you just a couple of statistics, that every day in America, 5 kids are killed by abuse or neglect. 8 kids commit suicide on a daily basis in America. About 514 public school students are paddled every day in school. We still have 19 states in the United States that allow teachers to paddle kids in school. Anybody want to take a guess at the state that paddles the most children in public school?
My guess is in the South.
It is in the South. Good guess. I'll give you the answer. At least in 2019, the winner was Mississippi, that had paddled over 90,000 children. Now, this is not certainly known by many folks in America.
Oops. Oh, we lost Jenny too. little
Something's going on
StreamYard.
with the universe.
Yeah, a little StreamYard glitch there.
Well, and it was getting so juicy. Here he comes.
Oh, good.
Sorry about that. I don't know. I'm not sure
That's
what that
okay.
was.
Yeah, we lost Jenny too.
Nope.
She'll
Oh,
be back.
jeez.
Here
Maybe.
she comes.
So,
Keep going.
I often share those some statistics with the schools I work with, depending on where they are, but really giving people an overview of the state of children in the United States is overall not really too good. Children remain the poorest age group in the United States. Nearly 1 in 6 of kids, young kids, are poor in America. And of those poor kids, nearly 73% of them are children of color. So we've got quite different things going on right next to each other. I alluded to the fact that New Jersey is a pretty highly segregated school. Well, a lot of our schools are resegregating, not only around race but around economics, and it's causing a lot of difficulty in a lot of different areas. Our youngest children are the poorest in America. This at the time of greatest brain development. So, I mean, we need to get this information not only to schools, really to everybody. Otherwise, we kind of continue to see and deal with the results of that and wonder what's going on as we watch the nightly news every night and see some of the violence that's happening currently as the pandemic has just exacerbated the stress in those communities as well as everybody's community.
Michael, you mentioned about like how trauma affects the brain and they can't learn. And there was a school that there were like about 5 kids, and I won't go into the cultural thing, but it was a cultural thing on top of it. And they were like, the teachers were literally calling the kids the rocks because it's just, rocks in their head. Yeah, it's like so sad.
Well, again, I our systems really, one, aren't training teachers very well. And 2, the purpose of schools really become very different. Our kids are chasing high stakes tests, even kids that aren't involved in adversity and trauma. I mean, you look at other people, this isn't just about other people's kids. I mean, you look at mental health issues, the high levels of anxiety and depression in our kids that are coming from really our high end communities. We got to ask ourselves, what exactly is going on? Where, as the adults of the community, what's happening with our children? And I see that end of it at the university level. It's, where I've seen over the last, 8 to 10 years, more and more young people, really gifted young people, carrying around high levels of adversity and or depression. So I think, children and youth show us what's going on with their behaviors. They don't tell us. And I don't think enough of us are kind of watching and really kind of getting a big snapshot of, hey, wait a second, maybe we should be thinking about doing something a little differently.
Well, I'm thinking that the teachers and the parents, I'm talking about myself as well, we carry our own trauma.
Sure.
And it is through these filters that we want to and try to connect with our kids. And we are all, in one way or another, building our own self-image, our awareness of self. And it's easy to interpret our own person based on the responses of the people around us. And that's why I love that we talk about kids acting out, because in that way of framing it, we're saying that it's really something that's coming from within them. And it's really helpful to think that way also with grown-ups, that we also act out. And we get to, we get to recognize that it's based on their filters. And we no longer have to seek to understand ourselves based on the responses. And my baby just walked in, so I'm going to run to her really quick.
Sure.
But just a little addition to this lovely conversation. Thank you.
Yep.
Love that, Jenny. And Stina has, and we've even had her on, Dr. Jen Forstall. Stina brought her to our attention, and wow, she has such a great origin story of how her kind of work came into existence. It's very much on resiliency, and it's so gentle and helpful for kids as well as parents. She has a book that's totally set up for the parents to do like their own inner work, and so therefore teachers to do their own inner work. What is the book? The Umbrella Effect, is that the title?
Yeah, The Umbrella Effect.
Can you tell us a little more?
Let's see. One of my, I think I have to put it in like my favorite books category, because when I got done reading it, I was like, well, I'll be buying a box of these to just have on hand and hand out at will. Yeah, exactly, Shell. And it was like, yay, one less book I feel that I have to write in the world. And her perspective and expertise and the research she's done, it's all so cohesive, and also just she breaks everything down very simply and gives parents like questions to ask your kids and conversation starters. And I think that, we, as a busy parent, like we have to have those very clear, very simple things we can do to help our kids, because just in the course of a school week, like it's hard enough just to get my kids to and from school, fed, get their laundry clean, and make sure they're showered and on bed and in bed on time. So, I've got a kid that's just started middle school. So there's all of the normal challenges, emotional, hormonal challenges of middle school social life. And my youngest is in 4th grade. And, just this week came home and was telling me this story with such exasperation and enthusiasm and like emotional passion in this story. And it was all about how they were walking down the hall. There was someone next to them. And it was kind of like they were both getting in line for the bathroom at the same time. And so this other kid was like, you cut me, and, got another kid involved, to, I don't know, Amanda, she cut me. And, it was this gang up of, oh, well, you can't cut. And I mean, it was so intense. Like the story just felt so intense. And then my kid had to go to the back of the line. This is the way the story was told. And as I got more information, found out that the back of the line was literally behind this other person. There was only this one other person in line. And they did move to the back of the line because they were just didn't want to cause more conflict. And I was trying to understand what happened. And I was just kind of having a moment of like, I guess, awe that, wow, cutting in line. When's the last time I thought about someone cutting me in line? Right. And when was the last time in my life that felt like a big deal? And so it reminded me that these kids with their little minds and their not quite developed prefrontal cortexes, that is a huge deal. And it's a very emotional moment, and so learning to get on their level and help them process and regulate, even when as an adult, we might say, come on, it's not that big of a deal. It is a big deal to them. And, Michael, to your point about even the kids that aren't dealing with these huge learning challenges and massive trauma, there's just all of these day-to-day things that go unnoticed and go unprocessed. And, I have memories from when I was a kid that I only got in trouble a very few amount of times. And it was often because I was misunderstood or something kind of happened, like it was an honest mistake or accident. And I was traumatized by those experiences because it felt like even if I do everything perfectly, I'm still going to get punished for things I didn't mean to do wrong, And so I was a straight A student and I was a great kid, but I still ended up with influences from my experiences growing up that have not been helpful to me as an adult, that I've had to rewire and relearn. So, something I was thinking about when you were talking was just something that gives me compassion for myself and my kids, and like even that situation about cutting in line, is looking at every situation and saying, how does this make sense? Because if you kind of go into it with the assumption that that does make sense, a kid that is acting out in this way has some kind of really deep pain, and it makes sense for them to try and protect themselves in this way, or get attention in this way, or try and get their needs met, or whatever that is, even if it looks completely chaotic, and even if we think it's blown out of proportion, or doesn't make sense for what happened. Like, if you come at it from that place of this makes sense, it can help you make so much more progress and have so much more compassion for what that person is going through, what you yourself are going through. Or if you're like, when I'm reflecting on past decisions I've made or things that I've done where I was like, why did I do that? Why did I make that choice? It's remembering that, well, at the time it made sense. It made sense to me, for better or for worse. So so thank you so much for your insights as well, Michael.
And you left off the other trauma for parents, homework. Holy moly. It just, with typical kids, that's just like you put up with so much sometimes. So yeah. Lighten up on the homework, teachers. Thank you.
Yeah, we haven't quite gotten into homework land yet. There's like a little bit that's very manageable for both of my kids, but just the amount of paperwork that comes home every day. And here's a new fundraiser that's due in a week and a half. And here's this upcoming event, and make sure this gets turned in. And I'm like, I know adults that can't keep track of that many things for themselves in their career or business. And now you have a 9-year-old or an 11-year-old that has to keep up with all of that, and the parents that have to add that to their plate, is intense, and definitely not slow or feeling very regulated to me when there's a new thing all the time. It's the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And I'm over here like, can we have like a year-long fundraiser? Can we do something that's like slow, teach the kids something, build something, like, do something great with the school? And it's like, no, here's a catalog of popcorn and chocolates to sell. So yeah, there's so much going on for kids. And like you said, Michael, the testing is, it just adds that another layer of stress and anxiety for everybody, because now it's not just about shaping character and giving kids space to make mistakes and learn. It feels very high stakes. It feels very like everything feels so important.
And the vast majority of it isn't. I like to tell teachers the only predictable outcome of learning something is forgetting it. And you think about, all the things that you've learned in a lifetime. I'm sure we've forgotten most of it, right? So, I think we're getting closer toward maybe rethinking some of the ways we envision what schools are, because really they're just right now doing exactly what they were designed to do. That's how we've we created them. We keep dragging the curriculum down lower and lower, so that we've got kids now doing things that we did in middle school and third grade. and I wonder sometimes if it's not a lot like toilet training early. We've really got to think about developmentally what we're doing with children and what is the purpose of school. What do we want to reimagine it to be versus what it currently is? Because many of those practices are very similar to what we sat through. And the higher up you go in the grades, the more it looks like school from 1950, right? I mean, you've got your desks in a row, you've got your lectures going on, you've got kids switching classrooms every 40 minutes, and no matter where you are in any almost country in the world now, it all looks exactly the same. We've got a standardized system. And quite honestly, I mean, I don't talk to many people, including teachers, that like it.
Well,
But
truth be told, the system is broken, right? The system is broken. It's been broken for a while.
Needs some work. Yeah, absolutely.
And like, you brought up a good point about like kids having to change classrooms every 40 minutes. Well, what about that child that takes time to acclimate? And now, like, by the time they get settled in a room and things start to go okay and they feel comfortable to do whatever they need to do and focus, then they've got to get up and move around and reacclimate all over again. And we keep shaking things up, and then there's so much pressure on top of it, and there's less and less compassion. So
but
how do we change the system so that it's more compassionate?
I think there's also pressure even from outside with families that are expecting things. I mean, you look at some of the pressure on schools in certain communities where we're now graduating kids from high school that have finished 2 years of college. So, I mean, and in some instances, I'm not opposed to that, but is that what we want to do, is just speed everything up so that, eventually and I wonder, but there's a lot of pressure on schools to do a lot of different things from different parts of the community. Not everybody's thinking like the five of us here. There's other folks that are given other directions, including departments of education, that continue to tweak and look at how do we evaluate teachers. And in most states now, part of their evaluation is on moving test scores. So again, we've kind of created these systems that really are not going to be an easy thing to change, but certainly need to be discussed more and more, both in schools, in districts, as well as in communities. And what do parents really want for their kids out of a public education or any kind of education, and how best can we begin to meet those needs? It's an interesting thing to try to reimagine.
Dora has a great background story when she was in school of having to deal with the bullies, and her friend Nina. They both would get picked on, but she would actually stand up for Nina and stand up to the bullies. Dora, would you share with us how you were able to look at the bullies and say, well, this one's most likely acting that way because? Will you share some of that story?
Yeah. Well, growing up, me and Nina were the same age. We knew each other from we were like 5 years old, and there were like 16 boys living in the area where me and Nina was, and they were like from 1 year older up to like 6-7 years older. So they were a pack, and me and Nina, we were together all the time. We walked to school together, we played together, and all of that. So whenever they came, we were together. And Nina, she would, well, they called her the fire truck because she started screaming and howling, and she would just burst into a high-pitched crying whenever they came, and they thought that was hilarious. So Oh, sorry, my dog is joining in here. He has something to say. I felt that I had to kind of defend us both. So I would use my mouth and throw things back at them, and I would kick them if they came too close. But I also saw that I knew their family a bit. You know, we lived in a little like a new building place where all the houses were new, so all the families had almost moved in together. So we grew up together, and I knew what it was like at home. It was a very transparent environment. So I knew that one of them had a father that was drinking and beating him. I knew that one of the guys were a bit on the heavy side, and if he didn't pick on us, someone would pick on him. So those things made me have a bit of compassion towards them still. I mean, I understand why they felt they had to act out, even though I didn't like to be in their punching bag, so to speak. But it was, and the same when my son got picked on when he was 10 years old in the school before we moved to the place where we live now. All my kids are adults now. My son is 31, so so it's been a while. But when he started telling me about this bully at school, and he was dreading going to school, and said that he would lock himself in the bathroom to avoid this guy and all of that, and we arranged a meeting with the parents and this kid, and it turned out that this kid was a really big husky boy, and he was picking on my son so he would appear tough. He would take it out on Marius to kind of look tough and yeah, to the other guys, so they wouldn't pick on him for his size or shortcomings in any way. His parents were divorced, so there was a lot of fighting. Things like that. So I always taught my kids to try to look behind. Why do people do what they do? You know, why does she pick on you? Why does he say that? And try to understand what's behind it. I think a lot of problems can be not always solved, but understood with a lot of compassion and understanding where they came from, what baggage they had. Yeah.
I love that.
Really nicely said. Thank you.
It kind of comes full circle in that way of like understanding where people are coming from, and we don't know what somebody's going through when they're acting out, or what their circumstances or home life, or like their upbringing, their socioeconomic status. We don't necessarily always know those things when we interact with other people. This like connects so perfectly in my mind to what Stina was sharing earlier about like somebody cutting in line at her child's school. Like, if I do think of times when people have cut in line or cut me off, or like if I'm waiting in line at the airport and somebody like is in a rush to board, like, you're not going anywhere. Like, we try to understand, like, what could they possibly gain by going ahead of me? Even I've done it. Like, I'm guilty of cutting in front of somebody because I want to claim that baggage space for myself. But like, I think about other times too, in traffic, somebody darts in and you don't know if they have an emergency, if they just are having a bad day, if something set them off and they just are in a rush to get somewhere. Like, we don't know what that other person is navigating. And if we can have more compassion, we don't necessarily need to understand why they're acting the way that they do, but we can respond differently to it instead of then reacting ourselves, or making a potentially volatile situation that much more volatile. Because what's not addressed in childhood is going to come back later on in life. Like whether you want it to or not, you're going to have to deal with some things some way or another. At least that's been my experience and the experience of people that I interact with. And we have a lot of traumatized adult children out there that have not unpacked their shit. And so if we can undo the system a little bit and figure out a way to approach it better, then I think it'll just create more compassionate humans. I do want to wrap up and share a comment that we had before we do that. The comment is from Michael Paterano. Thank you so much for being here, Michael. He said, this is an amazing conversation. I'll actually pop it up on the screen, although I think part of it got cut off at the end. This is an amazing conversation, being one of those non-classified kids from a toxic house. I chose to act out and rebel. I was thrown out of 2 high schools as the system wasn't created to support a kid like I was. Now, having children healing from trauma, I have seen it drop multiple sides. Also in the 80s, when I was in elementary school, my mom, my abuser, jumped at the opportunity to sign for the school to paddle me. It is about having being valued, heard, and seen for adults and children. And unfortunately, I can't see the rest of that, Michael. But that just brings the whole conversation full circle, because we've talked about the paddling, we've talked about the trauma, we've talked about the generational trauma a little bit that you then pass on to your kids if it's not addressed. And Michael, I want to ask you, while we still have you here with us, what are some of the things that we can do as humans to start trying to change the system at home? Like, are there some simple things that we can do to be more proactive about this?
Well, I think first we need to recognize it and what's going on. So with adults, I think it's important for adults to take some time to, examine their own lives, right, and their histories, and look through their own lens to begin to get an understanding of certainly pain travels generationally through families, and that pain, and unless it's stopped by somebody, just continues to get passed along. So I think it's important, and I'm really actually quite hopeful. I mean, I'm hearing more now about adversity and trauma than I ever have, and certainly if we went back in time 6 years ago, most people wouldn't have ever even heard of adverse childhood experiences or adverse community environments. So the message is beginning to get out. One of the things we've done here in our communities is show host and show a 1-hour documentary on called Resiliency. The biology of stress and the science of hope. We've shown that in our communities, and really kind of give people, just anybody that's interested in coming to these showings in the community, just kind of an opportunity to reflect on their own lives and their own stressors. So that's been helpful. In schools, what we do is really the antidote to all of this is connection. It's relationship. So with young people that are really struggling, we set up check-ins and check-outs at schools where, as Stina was saying, when their kids come home, you check in with them. How was your day? What's going on? What you got? Well, a lot of kids don't even have that. So we set it up in schools for those kids and do a check-in and check-out on a daily basis. These aren't huge tasks. We look at really, intentionally connecting with those kids that are causing schools the most difficulty or struggling the most. So we really want to do those kind of things, and then intentionally pass that along as they move through the grades. Teachers have always connected with kids, but it's been really informally done and kind of haphazard. This is an attempt to really intentionally begin this. We now, at least in New Jersey, many of our schools now have 3 and 4-year-olds. We have an opportunity to create over 10,000 hours. We have kids in our buildings to really formally wrap connections around those young people that may be missing in their lives. Intentionally pass them along as they shift schools, and really begin to make those connections real. And what they all need is a felt sense of being seen and a felt sense of being safe. And that's what we push in a nutshell.
Yeah, the connection, feeling seen, feeling safe. I'm here for it. I'm all about breaking the cycles. So I want to thank you, Michael, for joining us today to talk about the traumatized child. It really has opened up our eyes a little bit to become more aware of things like this going on with today's youth, with the community, and just throughout the world, if not America and beyond. So thank you so much for bringing us your expertise and knowledge and all of your experiences. Thank you to my other High Vibe women for being here with me today, and to all of you viewers out there, whether you're live or catching this on the replay. We also appreciate you being here and hope you join us again for more High Vibe conversations. We'll have another one just next week in a few short days, so stay tuned for more. And until then, bye for now.
Thanks for having me. See you later.
Bye.